Hey guys, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to Joy Jots, where I'm Najia and I'm standing in today for Ansay Tamra. So this week, don't worry, Ansay's not sick or anything. She's traveling, so inshallah she'll be back next week. But this week, I'm here for week 44, where we'll be talking about the concept of being mosqued. I know, that poor fan. But if I turn the fan off, the light goes off too. They're connected and the fan switch thingy is broken, so we're stuck with it. Sorry if it gives anybody any kind of difficulty. All right, so so where was I? Oh yes, week 44, mosqued. So, when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about my introduction. I thought, okay, well, like in the 80s and the late 80s and through the 90s, there used to be so much of a problem with women being mosqued. And then I went, I have heard recently of several stories where this kind of thing is still going on. And I remember the beginning of the push for mosques to be more inclusive for women and youth. And I remember the beginning of A Side Entrance, which is the blog that encouraged women to send pictures of the women's prayer areas where they, at the mosque that they were at. And I remember speaking at a mosque where there was a constitutionally enshrined policy of no women on the board. And when I went to speak, they had me speak like it was to youth at a youth lock-in. And the man that was also speaking spoke from the front of the musalla, and the girls were in the back area where the women's area was kind of like a sliding glass door. And they wanted me to speak from the back because, I don't know, I'm a grandma, but I shouldn't be standing in front of the boys, I guess. Like they're teachers at school. So, anyway, like it was some kind of drama. Like there's still this issue. Now, this was probably 2013 maybe. So it's a good, 9 or 10 years ago. But I was recently speaking to someone who reminded me that there are still situations and places where this kind of stuff goes on. And I thought about our reactions to it, subhanAllah, and especially in light of this week's essay that Ansay Tamra wrote. And I think that the first thing we have to do when we're thinking about being mosqued or not being mosqued or how things are at our mosque is we have to be open-hearted and remember that many, many mosques were built in the 70s and early 80s when immigrants first came, I'm talking about not the mosques that are like the Warithuddin Muhammad mosques, the ones that came out of the NOI, not the ones that were indigenous that were already here, but, when there was that big wave of immigration in the 70s and 80s, these mosques were built, and the people who built them patterned them after the masajid that they knew from home, from wherever they came from. And in many places in the Muslim world, the mosques were predominantly places where men went, and then also where there were classes and stuff, but predominantly it was a thing that the men went to because the way the society was set up, women had other ways to fulfill their spiritual and social and community needs. Like they had large extended families that all lived near one another. They had neighbors and friends who cooperated, who, would cook together, who had their own halaqas, they had their own spiritual and social lives outside of the mosque, but no less spiritual than the mosque. So when the masajid were built, they didn't take into account that when you're in a different country, first of all, you're basically limited most probably to your nuclear family. And second of all, the women especially are cut off from those extended social networks and those extended opportunities and access to spiritual growth. So it was kind of an inadvertent thing in many cases. So subhanAllah, we find ourselves in the situation where there isn't physical nor really emotional or mental space for women in many mosques. And unfortunately, that in some places continues today. So the place where we arrive at is, what shall we do about it? And there was a time and a place for identifying that problem and talking about that problem and really kind of commiserating with one another about that problem. And I think that at this point in time, we've kind of graduated beyond commiseration. And it's time for us to step into the next phase, which will be productive communication and kind of stepping up and taking our own agency. You know, Anse Tamra always tells a story about how she had this really beautiful, fancy, cozy, amazing fantasy about what Eid would be like for her family and what the Eid would be like in Syria when she moved there. And when she got there, she realized that, first of all, Eid isn't celebrated like, for example, we celebrate Thanksgiving or Christmas. It's not the same kind of atmosphere. There's a different priority, whereas Christmas and Thanksgiving are very dedicated to everybody coming together all at once. Eid was more about, separately visiting different family members. You'd kind of make this little train, this caravan, where you would go from one family member to the next and drink coffee and eat sweets. And by the time you got home, you were like so jazzed up on coffee that you couldn't sleep. And Anse's husband was somebody that, went to work every day. And his idea of work, not that she didn't go to work every day, but his idea of Eid was, Alhamdulillah, I have a chance to rest. So his priority on Eid was rest and sleeping. So for a while, Anse went through the same thing that we women have gone through with the whole women's place in the mosque, where we just commiserate and be sad and be like, this isn't fair. And then she realized, okay, well, if this is the way it's going to be, I can either sit around and be sad and whine and moan, or I can step up and create my own Eid, create my own fun. And from that Eid forward, she and her sister-in-law got together and made beautiful Eids for their children. They created their own traditions. They nurtured nostalgia in their kids so that when their kids think about it now, they have all the nostalgia for the way the clothes were set out and the gifts were given and all the good stuff. And they didn't just limit it to themselves. What they did was they decided to put on plays. They decided to have little get-togethers, to have potlucks, where they invited other women to come and enjoy their Eid with them. SubhanAllah. What a beautiful way to follow the Sunnah and to take leadership that is real service to other people. And so that is our goal. Our goal in our lives, when we find ourselves in any situation, not just about the mosques, but in any situation, our goal in life is to remember that there is no they. There is no they. There's no point in sitting around saying, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? They should have a nicer women's area. They should blah, 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 blah. Whatever it is, remember that there's no they. There's only us. So if you're in a situation where your mosque isn't necessarily providing a healthy atmosphere for women or for youth or whatever the case is, taking that leadership and taking onto yourself the joy and responsibility of creating something for yourself and for everyone in the community is a privilege and an honor. So, for example, Ansei talks in the book about 3 different options. One, I'm going to talk about the first one last. So, the second one, oh my gosh, I would have to look. Can't remember what the second one is. Somebody write it in there. But the third one is to get on boards, to run for office, to volunteer, to, take up the mantle of whatever is wrong. Clean the prayer room. Do whatever you're capable of doing in a volunteer capacity or in an elected capacity to improve the mosque yourself. The second one, I'm really praying that somebody can put it in there because I don't remember it and I don't want to go away from this screen because I'm afraid I will interrupt the live. So anyway, let's talk about the last one because I love the last one most. So the last one, which is actually listed first in the book, is to create a third space. And I love this because for many reasons. One reason is because Rabata has done that and continues to do that in all kinds of ways. And so there is that already established Masjid Rabata that you can attend on Saturday mornings from 3 to 5 a.m. Central Time. And all the programming that goes along with that and all of the challenges and pilgrims at home and special events and all of that stuff that goes along with it, they've kind of, set something out. They have created a third space for us. But also, this is something that we don't have to have anyone's approval for. We don't have to go to a board to request funding for. We don't have to do it in any specific certain way. There's not a prescribed template like you have to open your third space like this XYZ. It's an opportunity for every one of us to open a halaqah or rent a little space in a little shopping center and have events there, host book clubs, do whatever kind of activity. Nice. 2 is identify the simple problems and be the solution. And 3 is become the policymaker. Beautiful. Thank you, Daybreak Press. Whoever's manning the Daybreak Press Instagram. So there's nobody to tell us how we have to do it. There's nobody to whom we have to go for approval. We can start whatever kind of programming we want in our community. We can do it from our homes. In the, spring and summer and fall, we can do it outside. We can rent a little space to do it. And one of the, there's a Ribat student named Amina Jane O'Rourke. MashaAllah, she is doing this. She has her own little space. I think her company is called Shifa Healing. So if you just kind of look her up, you can see just see what other people are doing. Look at how other people are stepping forward. I know that most of us did not come into Islam or did not even come into adulthood really with the idea that we would become community leaders. Many of us, we come from cultures where the leaders were already established and our job was to go to the programming. So basically, our job was to be followers. Not followers in some kind of detrimental way, like that's a bad thing. But we came from places where there was a structure already in place. And there was programming already in place. And all we had to do was kind of plug into that programming. And there were services provided for us. There were avenues for us to get to know people. There was already stuff. But that's because in our previous incarnations at other institutions we've been at, those institutions have been there and developed that culture over centuries. And that culture is something that has been arrived at. It's not something that just sprouted up and we went to it from the time we were little. So we thought, oh, well, this is just how things how things are. But no, those things were arrived at as well. And who brought them there? The pioneers. There were pioneers of those institutions that brought about the culture of those institutions, that brought about opportunities for programming. And in our case, we have come into a situation where we are blessed enough to be the pioneers. So we get to set the agenda. We get to set the template. We get to create a legacy for ourselves. So in a way, subhanAllah, you can think about the idea of being mosqued or unmosqued, or our own personal relationships with the mosque, as something that is a challenge that we can accept, and also a blessing that we can blossom from. So if you have a wonderful mosque, work with them, be part of the community, be active, don't sit on your hands, don't stay in your house. I know, subhanAllah, we're just kind of getting back out into the universe after a couple of years of lockdown and whatnot. But don't stay home. Take advantage of the opportunity of being blessed by those in your community and blessing them in return. And if your situation at your mosque is challenging, accept that challenge and work within that system there. Do whatever you can. Show up, and be of service to people. And if the situation at your mosque is completely untenable and you don't feel like there's any productive or constructive way forward there, and there's no other mosque to go to, create your own third space. There's all kinds of, what do we call them? Opportunities that we have. Does anybody have anything that they'd like to share about a way that they've seen their community working, or a third space that they've appreciated, or a challenge that they've overcome at their mosque? I'm going to give about 10 seconds for the introverts to think about it. I remember, I'll just share one really quickly. There was a situation at an Islamic community that I used to be a part of that was uncomfortable because there was kind of a schism, and there was a group of people who said, okay, we're going to go and we're going to start our own mosque where we live, because it was a huge metropolitan area. So there was lots and lots of room for other mosques to start. So when they started this other mosque, they did it deliberately with the intention of having space for women, of having space for youth, of not just space, physical space, but space in the life of the mosque. You know, they kind of realized that in America or in another place where Muslims are the minority, a mosque has to be a community center. And that is something that they have nurtured and grown, and the entire community there revolves around that mosque. SubhanAllah, just like we always dreamed that our family life would revolve around the mosque, they created a space where that's actually done. So that's something where a group of people, not just women, but men and women, went and created a place that was more inclusive. All right, don't see anybody sharing. If I missed anybody while I was talking, just type it right back in there. I appreciate it. But let's go forth this week. Let's go forth back into our community lives, with the intention of making our community lives better, way better than they were before the pandemic, and with the intention of making them healthier, more inclusive, and taking on the joy of that responsibility for ourselves, and roping in all of our hapless friends who we can recruit to join us in the effort. And inshallah, that will grow into a legacy that we can share. Don't forget that a third space does already exist with Rabata. If you come to the Rabata Masjid, it is every Saturday morning, so it feels like Friday nights in the night. Saturday mornings at 3 a.m. to 5 a.m. Central Time, inshallah. All right. So we will close with our dua. Allahumma yahdina wa yahdi bina al-ibad wal-bilad. Allahumma yahdina wa yahdi bina al-ibad wal-bilad. Allahumma yahdina wa yahdi bina al-ibad wal-bilad. Oh Allah, please guide us and please guide through us nations and people with the intention of peace and openings and success and beautiful, joyful hearts and the victory of Islam. Al-Fatiha. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. All right, ladies, go forth and create community. Assalamu alaikum.